In the freezing outskirts of Ekaterinburg, Russia, lived a poor young boy named Mikhail, a child who grew up in a world carved by struggle, silence, and the sharp bite of winter. His neighborhood was a place where the snow stayed dirty, where the wind slipped through cracked windows, and where dreams felt too expensive for most people to afford. Mikhail's small apartment was cold more often than it was warm, and the old heater rattled like it was begging for mercy. His mother worked double shifts at a rundown factory that smelled of metal and smoke, returning home late each night with tired eyes and trembling hands. She tried her best, but life always seemed to demand more from her than she could give. Mikhail understood this far too early, so he picked up odd jobs, shining shoes, carrying groceries for strangers, selling tiny hand-carved toys he made from leftover wood scraps, just to help keep the lights on. Despite living in a world defined by poverty, Mikhail carried something rare inside him, a voice so pure and emotional that it felt like a miracle blooming in the middle of winter. His singing began as a way to escape the cold and the silence. At night, when the city felt quiet and only the distant echo of passing trains could be heard, he would sit beside an old, half-broken radio that barely caught foreign stations. It was through that buzzing speaker that he discovered American music, smooth melodies, powerful voices, storytellers who sang like they were speaking directly to his soul. He didn't understand every word at first, but he understood the emotion, the heartbreak, the strength. Those songs became his teachers, his comfort, and his best friends. Sometimes, neighbors would hear his voice drifting through the thin walls and stop in the hallway, listening in disbelief. They knew Mikhail had nothing, no resources, no special training, not even proper winter boots, but when he sang, it sounded like he had everything. His mother, exhausted but proud, would pause in the doorway and watch him with soft tears in her eyes. She often told him, "Your voice is the one thing life can't take from you." And Mikhail believed her. Singing didn't erase the struggles, but it gave him something stronger than hope, purpose. A reason to keep going when everything around him felt heavy and unfair. Every morning before school, he practiced near the frost-covered window, pretending the world outside was a giant stage and that someone, anyone, was listening. He dreamed of performing somewhere far beyond his cold neighborhood, somewhere bright and full of opportunity. Yet deep inside, he wondered if a boy like him could ever be heard. But even when doubt whispered in his ear, he kept singing. Because for Mikhail, music wasn't just a dream, it was survival. It was the warmth he created when the world around him felt endlessly cold. One cold afternoon, everything changed for Mikhail in a way he could never have predicted. A local street performer recorded a short video of him singing near a snowy marketplace, where he often stood to earn a few spare rubles. The marketplace was noisy, crowded, and filled with rushing footsteps, but somehow Mikhail's voice rose above the chaos like a warm light in the middle of a storm. In the video, his cheeks were red from the freezing wind, his gloves were torn, and his breath showed in white clouds as he sang. But none of that mattered. What people heard was a voice filled with emotion so real it felt like it could break the ice beneath their feet. The stranger posted the video online, not expecting much, but the world reacted instantly. Within hours, it spread across social media, gaining thousands, then millions of views. Comments from all around the globe poured in. "Who is this boy? Where did he learn to sing like this? Someone get him to America's Got Talent." The impossible suddenly became real when an international talent scout contacted him and offered him a chance to audition for America's Got Talent. When Mikhail and his mother read the email, they stared at it for minutes, convinced it was a scam. They had no money, no travel plans, no fancy clothes, just a dream that suddenly felt terrifyingly big. But with help from volunteers and donors who had seen the viral video, his travel expenses were covered. For the first time in his life, Mikhail stepped onto an airplane. As he looked out the small window and saw the clouds below, he felt like he was crossing not just countries, but the limits life had placed on him. Landing in Los Angeles felt like stepping onto another planet. The heat was strange, the sounds were different, and the city glowed with lights brighter than anything he had ever seen. On the day of the audition, his heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Backstage, surrounded by talented singers, dancers, and performers with experience far greater than his, Mikhail felt small, smaller than ever. He held the straps of his worn backpack tightly, trying to stop his hands from shaking. But he reminded himself why he was here. Not for fame, not for money, but because music was the only thing he had ever owned. When the stage doors opened and he stepped into the spotlight, time seemed to slow down. The audience stretched out before him like a sea of faces he could barely see through the bright lights. The judges waited with pens in hand, ready to measure every second of his performance. Mikhail took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm inside him. Then the music began. He closed his eyes and let every memory, every cold night, every struggle, every moment he doubted himself, rise through his voice. The audience fell absolutely silent. His voice wasn't just strong, it was raw, vulnerable, and filled with a truth that no one could ignore. In that moment, the skinny, shy boy from Russia didn't just sing. He belonged. When Mikhail finished his final note, the entire arena erupted into an explosion of applause, cheers, and disbelief that seemed to shake the walls. It was the kind of reaction performers dream about but rarely experience. Instant, powerful, unstoppable. People in the audience stood up one by one, then all at once, creating a wave of rising bodies and roaring voices. Some wiped tears from their faces, others simply stared at the stage as if they had just witnessed something sacred. But the most overwhelming reaction came from the judges' table. One of the judges, known for being tough and rarely emotional, sat completely still for a moment, her eyes shining with tears she didn't bother to hide. Then, in a sudden surge of emotion, she stood up, placed her hands on the golden button in front of her, and slammed it with all the force of a moment she never wanted to forget. The sound of the golden buzzer echoed across the arena like thunder, and instantly, golden confetti burst from the ceiling and rained down in a glowing storm around Mikhail. He froze, stunned, unable to move, as the shimmering pieces danced around him. For a second, he didn't even understand what had happened. His knees went weak, and he dropped to the floor, covering his face with trembling hands. His entire life, every moment of hunger, every night of cold, every helpless tear, flashed before him like a movie he couldn't stop watching. He had dreamed of singing for the world, but he had never imagined the world would stand up and honor him like this. His mother, watching from backstage, cried openly and pressed her hands to her mouth, unable to believe that the boy she once comforted in the dark, quiet nights was now shining under a rain of gold. The judges rushed onto the stage, and the judge who hit the golden buzzer knelt beside Mikhail, her voice shaking as she told him, "You were born for this. The world needs to hear you." Those words, spoken to a boy who once believed he was invisible, felt like a miracle. The confetti continued to fall as Mikhail lifted his head and looked out at the audience. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel poor. He didn't feel small. He didn't feel like the world had forgotten him. He felt powerful. He felt seen. He felt alive. That moment didn't just change his life, it rewrote it. Reporters, producers, and fans flooded social media with his story within minutes. Headlines appeared around the world calling him the Russian boy who sang his way into America's heart. People from every corner of the globe reached out with love, support, and inspiration. But even with all the attention, the only thing Mikhail cared about was the truth he had carried with him since the beginning, that no matter how cold life becomes, a voice filled with passion can create its own warmth. And under the golden rain, Mikhail finally understood something he had never dared to believe. He was meant for greatness, and his journey had only just begun.